quantitative techniques has to do with what? A model that enables a manager to make a well-informed decision. A model or a mathematical model that enables a manager to make a well-informed decision. Now, when we say a manager, you will agree with me that when we talk about a manager, we are not just talking about only those who are managing a profit-making organization. Okay, we are also talking about those who are into non-profit making organization. They are all what in the same category of what managers. Okay, now when we say quantitative techniques, we are looking at those mathematical tools that enables a manager to make a well-informed decision. And whenever we talk about a well-informed decision, we are just talking about what a scientific and objective decision. What do we mean by a scientific and objective decision? A decision that any other person incorporating the same variables that you have considered, any other manager taking into cognizance the same variables and parameters that you have also considered will arrive at the same conclusion. We say that such process is scientific. In other words, quantitative technique enables managers to make what scientific decisions, to take decisions that are based on well-informed processes. Now, in terms of the meaning and the definition of quantitative techniques, it is important for us to know that quantitative technique is not necessarily a business concept. Okay, it's not a business concept. It's borrowed from different fields like mathematics and statistics. Okay, because some of the concepts we'll be discussing will be mainly from mathematical concepts, which is from the field of what? Mathematics. Now, by way of the definition, the things we'll be learning for this particular introduction will be the meaning of what? Quantitative technique, how did it start, and then what are the essentials of what quantitative technique. And I think we'll stop at looking at essential features, then maybe we'll meet next time. We'll now look at what the step-by-step approach in what operation technique. So, the meaning of quantitative technique, what does it mean? Under what circumstances did we start making use of quantitative technique? What are the key factors and personalities that contributed significantly to the growth of what quantitative techniques? Let me begin by way of definition. Like I've said before, quantitative technique is a mathematical model that enables business managers to solve business-related problems. A mathematical model that enables managers to solve business-related problems. Now, we're bringing it back now to what? To business. Remember, I said that quant can be used both in business and in other areas. So, but for the purpose of this, we're now talking about what? Business, because our main emphasis is on business. How do we use quant in making business what? Decisions? Now, having said that quant is a mathematical model that enables a manager to solve business problems. Every manager relies on this key information provided by quantitative technique in making decisions. But I want to also bring the other part of it. Every management decision is based on what? Quantitative information, which is provided through this quantitative technique, and qualitative information. Note, qualitative information are not captured by quantitative technique because they are not what? Accurately measurable. And decisions taken using quantitative technique are most often classified as what? Objective decisions. They are most often classified as objective decisions. While decision taken with what? Qualitative inputs are most often classified as what? Subjective what? Decisions. Okay? Now, and managers must be able to incorporate some part of the qualitative and some part of the quantitative information to be able to make an optimal decision. Now, when you'll be hearing me talk about optimal decision, what do we really mean by that optimal decision? Optimal decision is nothing but talking about what? Resource allocation, being able to effectively allocate resources, being able to effectively manage the material, manage the human resources, and then manage the organization entirely. So this point enables us to what? Generate the required quantitative information upon which managers will now base their decisions. Please note, like I said, it is both. We have two key components, qualitative and quantitative information. Quantitative information is processed and provided by the manager through quantitative techniques. For that of qualitative, the manager use their own subjective reasoning to process the qualitative information because they cannot fit into the model. Remember, we said quantitative technique is what? A mathematical model. So it can only fit into the mathematical model if it is quantifiable. In other words, if they are measurable quantitatively, that is the only way they can come in. Okay. So outside that, it is now left for the manager to use their discretion and experience, okay, to resolve the issue of what's qualitative. But our emphasis in this course is not on the qualitative. But I just want to sound this so that you know that we are not, a manager is not balanced, focusing only on what? Quantitative. Because there are so many economic and business problems that a manager cannot solve using only quantitative tools. Okay? You have to be balanced in both quantitative and what? Qualitative information. And by the time we progress, you will see that one of the ways to develop a sound skill in handling qualitative information is what? Experience. Okay? You must have sound experience to be able to manage qualitative issues effectively. Okay. Now, having said that, I would want us to now begin by looking at history. How did this quantitative technique come about? Having known what is quantitative technique, how did it all start? Okay. Now, the history of quantitative technique dates back to the Second World War. The soldiers in the Second World War were confronted with severe issues, severe problems. They were faced with different problems. And this quantitative technique provided them with an opportunity to be able to resolve some of those problems that they faced in those days. And like we said, this quantitative technique can be referred to as what? Operational research. It can also be referred to as what? Management science, or business what? Mathematics, or decision analysis. Why is it referred to as management science? Now, it is referred to as management science because the founder of management science, Lord Frederick Taylor, who propounded the theory of scientific management, built it strongly on this scientific approach to management. And I began by explaining to you what it means to arrive at the scientific. When we talk about scientific approach, we are saying that this method, it's a methodical process that gives you the same result, applying the same variables. Okay? So this quantitative technique is a scientific approach, which leans strongly on the scientific management propounded by Frederick Taylor. A typical example of a model is a straight line equation, which by the time we will do regression analysis in this same quant, you will understand what we're saying. Let me just use it as an instance now. A regression analysis is based on a straight line equation. Y is equal to A plus bx. What does it tell us? That y, which is a dependent variable, is a function of the intercept or the constant. There is a function of the constant and the slope times the independent variable. In other words, you can use the information about the independent variable to predict what will happen on the dependent variable. Therefore, if you know the state of the independent variable, you can tell exactly what will happen to the dependent variable. This is an example of a model. Okay. Now, a regression model enables you to use the value of one variable to predict the value of another. So long as the information you fed in is the same. Remember, we're talking about scientific approach now. If the information you fed in for the independent variable is the same with the information you fed in for the dependent variable, what a manager in Nigeria will get will be the same result with what a manager in Japan will get. And that's what makes it the scientific approach. Okay. Now, Lord Frederick Taylor was the one who actually brought this scientific management to limelight. I'm sure most of you have a management background. This will not be a new concept to you, because Frederick Taylor is a notable fellow when it comes to the field of management, and his theory is cutting across every field, and everybody in management sciences would not say they have not come across this concept before. But we are not focusing on Frederick Taylor. We are only saying that Frederick Taylor is more like the personality whose work have brought quantitative technique to limelight, because he propounded the scientific management, and the quantitative technique we're studying is also based on scientific approach. Okay. Now, the modern quantitative technique that we know today came into existence from the Second World War, like we said, where the army were having different issues, and they had to look for approaches on how to resolve those issues. Remember, we started by talking about optimum decision, optimum resource allocation, and being able to achieve the overall objective of the organization. Okay, so the army in the Second World War, they began to find a way to resolve their problem, and one of the formidable tools that was handy for them was this quantitative technique. It helped them for resource allocation. It helps them to resolve some complex issues, some problems that were not just common. It helps them to resolve problems that were just coming up in the war front that they really did not anticipate before going in. So they had this quantitative tool as a very veritable instrument that enables them to achieve that. So having said that, Frederick Taylor is one of the major authors who have actually advanced the field of quantitative technique significantly through his work, scientific management. Now, there are three key issues that have led towards the development of this quantitative technique to what it is known today. One is the concept of this World War that we've talked about. Then, after the World War, people began to conduct more research on this area of operational research. They began to conduct more research on quantitative techniques, how best to use quantitative technique, how best to use the methodology in order to get the best outcome of every business. And then, as they were developing it, it was helping in different, both in medicine, it was helping in military, it was helping in, even in health sciences, it was helping in business, which is the area we are focusing on now. Okay? It's one of the person also who conducted the research that led to the development of this quantitative technique is George Dessen in 1947, who brought the simplest method used in solving linear programming. He was the one that brought the simplest method out of research. He came up with the simplest method in solving linear programming. Now, all these have led towards to the development of the modern quantitative technique that we know today. And it didn't stop there. Today, the advancement in computer technology had also revolutionized the concept of quantitative technique, because a good number of tools and techniques that are being used in business today are all computer-based. By the time we begin to look at the approaches to quantitative techniques, you will see at the point of model development, okay, you will see that apart from this, having the mathematical model, that there are computer models, okay, that can now help you to solve different business problems. All these were made possible by the advancement of what? Computer. For some of us who are already working in a corporate organization, you know that you can actually use Excel, build a model, okay, what they call financial modeling now. You can use Excel to build a financial model where all you need is just to do the right posting and key in the right thing, and then the model will produce for you a workable financial statements. Okay? Why? Because you have specified a model. And anybody who uses that template, that is why we say it is scientific. Anybody who uses that same template, that same model, will get the same result that you have gotten, having fed the same information that you fed into the system. And that is why we call it what? A scientific approach. Then, having said that, this is the three key things I mentioned. One, Frederick Taylor is one of the key persons that advanced this field of quantitative technique through his work. And the Second World War, where soldiers had to make use of this quantitative technique tool in solving some of their problems at the war front. And the further research that were conducted to see the workability of these tools. Yes, it's not only a military tool. It's a tool that can be used in medicine, it can be used in business, it can be used in engineering, different fields. So further research were now conducted, which deepened your understanding of the modern quantitative techniques that we have today. And if it's already stated in your work, one of the key persons that also advanced this is George D, who provided a simplex method for solving linear programming. We'll get that when we go to the section of linear programming for you to see how you can use simplex method to solve linear programming problems. Okay. Now, having said that, we have been able to find what is quantitative technique. I take it again. I said that it is a mathematical model. It is a mathematical model that enables a manager to solve business problem. A mathematical model that a manager employs in solving business problem. You can also define it to mean a collection of mathematics-based techniques that enables a manager or decision maker generally to make optimum resource allocation decision. Now, we've also talked about the circumstances that trigger the use of the emergence of quantitative technique, which I talked about the Second World War, where the soldiers had to adequately and effectively deploy the use of quantitative technique in resource allocation and in solving some of their complex problems. We also looked at the key personalities that advanced this field significantly, talking about what Frederick Taylor, and then the other factors that helped in the development of the modern quantitative techniques, which I said is the Second World War. Talked about what further research in that area, and then advancement in what in computer development. So this is a kind of an overview of quantitative technique, the origin, how it started, who have contributed to its development, how did it develop to the current modern quantitative techniques that we know today. Okay. Do you have any question with this explanation I have given? Any question? So let me believe that one, you can be able to define what is quantitative techniques. And two, you'll be able to identify the key factors that contributed significantly to the development of quantitative techniques and the personality behind the development of quantitative technique. I assume that you can be able to do that. So, if you don't have any question, I will just move on. But if you have any question, please just indicate that you have a question. Or if you don't have a question, can you just say, I can move on? Go on will be enough for me to continue. Just go on will be enough for me to. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so what are the essential features of quantitative techniques? Now, see, there are some things that are not contained in the material that you have right now in terms of what the approach is. What is contained here is only what the features of what quantitative techniques. But the approaches are, I think it's, the feature have to come first before the approaches. So we are going to be following it the way it is in the material. If not, the best thing would have been to bring in the approaches first before you talk about the features. But the feature came first in the material. So now, what are the features of what quantitative techniques? Now, there are 6 key features of what quantitative techniques, which are the things we're going to be discussing right away. One, we said that the quantitative technique is a scientific approach. I think I have said this again and again and again, and it's still surfacing again. It is what a scientific approach. The second thing is that it makes use of what models. In other words, it makes use of mathematical models. Thirdly, it is a systems approach. Okay. It is a systems approach. In other words, it enables you to incorporate different systems that place together toward achieving the organizational objective. We also say that it's an interdisciplinary approach, and it recognizes risk and uncertainty, and it aids management in decision making. One, I said, is a scientific approach. It makes use of models. It is a system approach, interdisciplinary approach. Recognition, it recognizes risk and uncertainty, and aids management in decision making. These are the 6 key features of quantitative techniques. Like I said, the approaches will come after these features. Okay. Now, scientific approach. When we say that it's a scientific approach, I have explained it before. Whichever results you get using the same model, whichever the result will have to be consistent, provided all the variables that you feed in are the same. I think that again. A model is said to be scientific if it produces a consistent result given the certain variable components. Now, I have used regression result in the scientific model, so let's not just waste much time on it. when I said that a regression model is based on a straight line equation, which is y is equals to e plus x, which represents the relationship between a dependent and an independent variable, where the value of the dependent variable is determined or predicted using the value of the independent variable. So long as you feed in the right variables, the results produced by this model will have to be consistent, and that is what we mean by scientific approach. Take for instance, in accounting equation, where profit is, okay, we have different, let me not just talk about accounting equation, which is talking about assets is equals to equity plus liability. Let me look at profit. Profit is equals to revenue minus what? Expenses. Revenue minus expenses. Now, if you look at it, there are three variables there. One is the profit, two is revenue, and the third one is what? Expenses. Now, you know that these expenses as a variable can be broken into further components. Expenses can be fixed cost. It can be what? Variable cost. Now, so long as you feed in using this model I have just stated, profit is equals to revenue minus what? Minus expenses. You will use it to get the same profit if you feed in the same variable. And such approach is what we refer to as what a scientific approach. So it can be confirmed, it can be any other person. No, it doesn't mean that you are the only one who will get the same thing. One of the key difference between a subjective and a quantitative approach is that a qualitative approach is that a qualitative approach is subjective, and being subjective, it means that what you will get in your own analysis will be far. Then when you talk about the use of model, now you can see we say that quantitative technique is what? A mathematical model. Therefore, you cannot talk about quantitative techniques without talking about models, without talking about business models, without talking about quantitative mathematical models. So we make use of models, kinds of model in what? In quantitative techniques. A good example is one I have just mentioned. Okay. Regression, straight line equation, and this profit equation. Now, the next one is a system. Please, if there is any of these characteristics that I'm explaining, now when you talk about systems approach, now every organization comprises of different component parts that works together to achieve what? The organizational objective. Now, each of these systems, both the main systems and the subsystems, are all working together to do what? To ensure that the overall organizational objective is achieved. Now, quantitative technique will enable you to ensure that there is no suboptimal performance in any way, ensuring that the interrelated components are functioning together. The interrelated components, all of them are working together to ensure that the overall objective is what? Achieved. So the one component will not be doing a different thing and another component will be doing a different thing. So quantitative technique enables you to accommodate all these different components, okay, that goes together to achieve the organizational objective. Now, what that looks like this one we're talking about now is what? The interrelated discipline. Now, we all know that in every organization, we have different departments. We have different departments. Like the typical example, we come to a profit-making organization. You can have something like accounts department or finance department. You can have marketing department. You can have administrative department. Different units. Now, but each of these units must work together to achieve what the organizational objective. The accounting department will not say they are different from that of production department, and the production department will not say they are different from that of marketing department, because each must work together to achieve this objective. And quantitative techniques enables you to take into cognizance each of these different departments that are working together at different dimension and different capacity. Okay. Now, that's about interdisciplinary approach. Then risk and uncertainty recognition. Quantitative techniques knows that making projections, making forecasts using a particular model, that no business projections is free from an element of error. So uncertainty accommodates the possibility of this risk that will arise as a result of uncertainties, and then makes use of sensitivity analysis to know which variable will change to give rise to a significant change in the dependent variable or in the target variable. So sensitivity analysis will now help you to know what will be the outcome of this your analysis if there is a change in a particular variable. All this is what quantitative techniques enables us to achieve. Quantitative techniques incorporates these tools. Now, I'm sure you must have heard what we call deterministic model, probabilistic model. Deterministic model is a model that is used when your variable is known with certainty. I take it again. A deterministic model is a model that is employed when your variables are known with certainty. But when you talk about a probabilistic model are now those models that, the variables are not known with certainty. Okay? The variables are not known with certainty. And because of that, okay, so I was talking about probabilistic and deterministic models, okay, which enables you to incorporate these risk and uncertainty elements. Now, when I started by saying that a deterministic model is that model whereby the variables that you feed in are known with certainty, while the probabilistic model, the variables you are using are not known with certainty. And example I gave is, let's say you are trying to determine the net present value of a particular project. You have projected the cash inflows, but you think that some changes in the unique condition might result that your projected cash inflow will not come as you have planned them. So what will now enable you to take care of that uncertainty about the cash inflow by attributing probability to it. And that's why I began by telling you that what has to do with both mathematics and what statistics, because probability will have to come into play. So that is one of the characteristics of what quantitative techniques. Now, the last one, which is the sixth one, is what? It aids management in what? In decision making. It aids management in decision making. Please, if there's anything you don't understand in these two types of model I explained now, please can you ask your question concerning deterministics and probability model? Or if you have any question with all the things I've been explaining, can you just ask? Why I'm asking this is because this particular deterministics and probabilistic model might not be explicitly explained in your notes. So that's why I think I take time to explain them so that you understand what we mean by the two. So if you don't have any question, I say go on. Okay. Like I said, the two concepts might not be explicitly explained in the material, so that's why I took time to explain them. Right, Louis, you're asking if the two concepts are in the material, so I had to explain them because they might not be explicitly explained in the material. Okay, so now these are the 6 key features of what quantitative technique. Now, is there anybody in this class that cannot? Is there anybody in this class that cannot explain the features of quantitative technique? Okay, Louis said that I should take this once more. Okay, let me just explain it again, please, for the interest of Louis and some other persons that may not. I'm talking about what? Quantitative technique, being able to do what? To accommodate risk and what? Uncertainty. Okay. Quantitative techniques, being able to accommodate risk and what? Uncertainty. One, I said, we have two key models. One is deterministic model and another one is known as probabilistic model. And I said that in quant you use deterministic model when the variables you are feeding in are known with certainty. In other words, if you are feeding in a variable, if for instance you are looking at the profit model we talked about, the profit is equals to revenue minus what? Expenses. Now, if you know your revenue with certainty and you know your expenses with certainty, then such model is known as what? Deterministic model. But you and I know that in business, you cannot say that in 2021, your revenue is going to be what? 500 million. You cannot know that for certain. So, you will have to create some level of probability. The moment that concept of probability comes in, now you have moved from a deterministic model to what? A probabilistic model. Because you are now accommodating some certain element of what? Probability. Louis, that is what I want to explain. And that is why we say that quantitative techniques recognizes risk and what? Uncertainty. I guess it's clear. Okay. So now, we now finally talked about what? It aids management in what? In decision making. Now, the manager can make forecasts make projection, can make estimate. Take for instance now, a manager can now, after a meeting, the manager might decide that, okay, next year our profit target is to what? Is to make 500 million as profit. Now, it will now decompose revenue. Depending on the number of products they are selling, it decompose revenue and then make projection as to what volume of revenue are going to be realizing from this region, from the other region, from the other region. Okay, then expenses will also be decomposed, and at the end, the manager will be able to do what? To make a well-informed decision, including the incorporation of what? Probability. Peradventure, some of his projections did not work. Okay, so these are the things that we're looking at in the area of what? Features of what? Quantitative techniques. Okay, and whereby you don't have any question in this area, I believe everybody in this place can be able to do what? Discuss the features of quantitative techniques. Now, the next thing now is moving into the what? The steps in operation research. Like I said, just like when we were talking, when we were discussing operations management. Here, whenever we say operation research, whenever we say quantitative techniques, we are still saying the same. But whenever we say decision analysis, it also refers to this operation research and what management science. Of course, who were in operational research, we talked about what the production system making up of different components. The same thing is applicable in quantitative techniques. Quantitative techniques, like when we talked about operations management, we talked about what? Raw material. So here we're not talking about raw data. Okay, remember what we're trying to do is to generate information that will enable the management to make a well-informed decision. So you have to gather your raw data, feed it into the quantitative places, and then generate a meaning information from that quantitative. Okay, being able to generate raw data, transform it, that is using quantitative analysis, solve the model, use the model to evaluate the raw data, and then come up with what? A meaningful or in the other way around, we talk about output. Here we're talking about what? Information. Okay, because the output of quantitative technique is to give the management what? Information. Okay, let's just now move into what? The steps. The steps in operation research. Please, I keep saying it. We use operation research again. But this is reaching into another. And the first is what? Problem recognition or problem definition. Now, if you look through other materials, they do call these steps different names. Okay. Now, this is what actually we refer to as what? Approaches towards quantitative techniques. The approach, because if you are reading your material, then towards what is facing you. First of all, define the problem properly and accurately. Define the problem properly and accurately. And you must have to develop a clear and a concise statement that gives direction and meaning to the actual problem that you are going through or that the organization is facing. So at this point, at this step, our duty is nothing but to do what? Identify and recognize every problem that is facing the organization and then be able to articulate it. Okay? Take for instance, you are in a competitive environment whereby you are a price taker, for instance, by virtue of you not being a cost leader, you are a price taker. So, and being a price taker, what it means is that the price you charge for your product is a function of the price that the major competitor will charge. Now, you will be making a projection of raising your profits to a certain percentage by what selling so number of products, and you did not articulate all that will play around. What if your competitor, being a cost leader, decide to reduce price? And depending on the nature or the structure of the firm you are operating in, a reduction in price following the law of demand, okay, will increase the quantity demand of your competitor, okay, thereby reducing your own quantity demanded. So you must be able to articulate all this before you can be able to now feed it into the model. So first, identify the problem. What do you intend to achieve? What is the problem facing the organization? What are the issues facing the organization? Clearly and sufficiently identify each of the problem that is facing the organization. Then, having defined the problem, having identified the problem or recognized the problem as the case may be, the next thing is you now put these problems, because that problem you must have, breaking it down into different facets and then putting it under different perspectives that will enable you to now feed it into model. Then the next thing is extracting essential features of what the variable. Like now, if you are able to dissect the problem that is facing the organization, you are now going to extract key variables, okay, in each of these problems. Say, for instance, the problem is that your sales might fall next year because, let's say, the weather forecast have shown that next year there is going to be drought, and in such a forecast, it is actually telling negatively on your product. So you must be able to define your revenue properly. You must effectively define your revenue, because if you feed your revenue into the model without defining it based on this problem that you anticipate around it, the tendency will be that your projections will not, or your results from your analysis will be faulty because you did not accommodate all the necessary problem, or you did not properly identify all the problems and then extract the relevant variable that's associated with it. Then, having done that, the next thing is model construction. In other words, model development. Model development. I've said it before and I'm repeating it again. Quantitative analysis makes use of a mathematical model. You must have a good understanding of the model you are using for effectively ensure that the variables are properly fed into the model. Take, for instance, in the later part of this course, when we'll be doing correlation analysis, okay, when we'll be doing correlation, we know that correlation is a statistical tool that enables us to know the relationship, the degree of relationship between two variables. Okay. Now, you must be able to, identify the two variables you are testing its relationship. And you also must be able to identify that actually a relationship, discovering the degree of relationship between these two variables will make any meaning for you. Let me use corruption as a typical example. If you generate data on corruption, that is the volume of that's associated with corruption in Nigeria, and run a correlation between corruption and economic growth. Okay, you will discover there is going to be a very positive correlation between corruption and what economic growth. Now, well, you must know what will this actually tell you. It shows a high positive correlation between economic growth and what corruption. If you have this kind of variable, you must be able to understand it very well and study it carefully so that you'll be able to make the right decisions on this kind of what variable. Otherwise, you may end up fitting in variables into a model that will now give you a result that you might not be able to interpret it. Take for instance, in this correlation we're talking about, you are now saying that okay, if economic growth increases by this, or if corruption increases by this, that economic growth will now increase. Are you getting it? Now, will you now begin to say that corruption should be encouraged in order for economic growth to do what? To increase. So these are the dynamics that you must have to understand for you to be able to construct a sound model. You need to understand all the variables that plays in to be able to construct what? A sound what? Model. Secondly, in model development, having been able to identify your key variables properly, the next thing in model development is what? Your measurement scale. Your measurement what? Scale. What do we mean by measurement scale? We have 4 key measurement scales. We have ordinal scale, we have interval scale, we have nominal scale, and we have ratio scale. I don't identify them in any order, but these are the 4 key scales that we have. Now, in your model, it will be very erroneous for you to model an ordinal variable with a ratio variable. You must be able to understand the dynamics of each of the variables that you are working with, so that you don't go ahead and model a ratio variable with an ordinal variable. Okay. Now, we have what we call a stochastic model, and we have what we call a scale model. Well, let me not get into this one because they are not in your material, so that I don't add things that are not part of your material to you. Okay, let's just stay put to this, your material. Okay, so having constructed this model, you remember, you have identified your problem, you have extracted, okay, the relevant variables that will reflect this problem that you are trying to solve. Now you have constructed a model. Then the next thing facing you now is to do what? To generate the data, or what? For your data analysis. You now go ahead and collect data collection. Now talk about if you are using profits, you have to look at the selling price of your product. You have to look at the quantity of the goods that you sell. You have to look at the fixed and the variable cost. You have to look at the corporate tax. These are the things you must consider before you can arrive and say, okay, these are the kind of profit that I'm projecting. Okay, so now having constructed your model, which will reflect some of the variables, which will accommodate some of the variables you have constructed. Like if you look at your material, we have that you have a model there which represents a typical model of this profit model we're talking about, and the total cost model. Okay, now we have that profit is equals to total revenue minus what? Total cost. Now, I will say that the total cost is now equals to what? Total fixed cost plus total variable cost. You must be able to understand all these effectively to be able to fit in your model in this and your variable into this equation. Okay. So let me take this total revenue is equal to price times what? Quantity. You know that for you to get your revenue, remember when I talked about projecting a profit or estimating a profit of 500 million, I said you must know what your revenue will be. Okay, you have projected that by next year you are going to sell certain quantity, but the weather forecast have changed. That quantity you projected to sell, you might not be able to sell it again. Okay, have you been able to accommodate such changes? Secondly, the price. You are not a price. You are a price taker in the industry where you're operating. You are not a price leader. You take the price that the major the dominating firm is quoting. So what if the dominating firm reduces their price? What happens? So all these are the factors that comes into play in coming up with what a system or an approach that will give you the best decision or the best information that will enable you to make the right words. So if you want to decompose, if you look at this model in your notes, we started by saying that what the profit is equal to what? Total revenue minus total cost. And we took it further. Look at what the components, what make up your revenue. What are the things that makes up your revenue? These are the things you must understand effectively for you to build a very significant model. Now, we broke down the revenue into revenue is now equal to the price and what? The quantity. So you must know how much are you charging. And you must also understand the relationship between the price you are charging and the quantity that you are selling. Okay? Because when you increase your price, depending on the type of market where you are, whether you are in a competitive market or in a monopolistic market or you are in a oligopolistic market, you have to understand how price changes and quantity changes works together. The same thing is to look at what fixed cost. We are broken the total cost into what fixed cost and what variable cost. All these are at the level of model development. All these things I'm talking about are at the level of what model development. You must have to break all the components, all the variables, because from the beginning you must have studied all these variables and understand how they relate to the problem that you are going through. Okay, my voice is breaking. Okay, Ibrahim said that my voice is breaking. Okay, Chimobi is saying that it's clear on this side. So, Ibrahim, can you just confirm? Maybe it could be the network from your own end. Okay. Joe is also saying that it's okay. Ibrahim, I think you have to confirm if it is from your own end. Okay. So you need to understand the interplay of each of these components. Okay, for you to be able to build a model that will Now, if you look at where we started, let me just share my. Okay, if you can see the note, if you can see the note in your phone while we are doing this discussion, just say yes. If you cannot, say no. Let me know if I'll just share my this thing then, so that you see the envelope. Okay. Ibrahim say you can see it. Okay. Let me share my screen so that you will see the. Let me share my screen so that you will see the note. Okay, I guess you guys are seeing the screen now. So what we're saying now, if you look at this is sorry, I have to. Okay, I guess you guys are seeing the full screen now, right? Okay, so you have net profit or profit, whatever way you call it. You have net profit or profit. That is what it was denoted with NP, which is equals to what total revenue minus what total cost. Now, as a model developer, you don't just stick this and run away. You have to dissect each of these variables that made up this model. If you look at this equation 1, you don't just take it up and run like that. Okay? You have to look at it. Equation 1. What we have as our, assuming this is a straight line equation, what we have as our dependent variable is profit. In other words, profit depends on our revenue and on our total cost. Now, but revenue also is influenced by something else, while our total cost is influenced by something else. Okay? For you to build an effective model, you must factor in all these things. Now, total revenue is influenced by price and quantity demanded. Okay? So, you have to consider what is the rate of your price in the market, what is the quantity that your market share currently, what happens if you increase, because you are looking at increasing your profit or maintaining your profit against maybe new entrants into the market, maybe new competitor have entered the market, which you know that if a new competitor enters with maybe a lower price or a better quality, the person is definitely going to take part of your market share. So what are the strategies you are going to use to ensure this model will produce a useful model and a useful information for you? Now the next one is what the total cost. Now total cost is made up of two components, the fixed cost and the variable cost. And you must know what are the fixed cost components. And the total cost, is it made up of more of fixed cost or more of what? Variable cost. If your total cost is made up of more of fixed cost, okay, what it means is that when your sales are falling, your total cost will not be falling at the speed of the fall in your sales. But if a greater portion of your total cost is made up of what? Variable cost, what it means is that as your sales are falling, your total cost also will be falling together with what? With your sales. Meaning that you don't have too much overhead, fixed cost to maintain when your sales are falling, because variable cost moves in the same direction with increase in what? In sales. Okay? Now, if you look at this variable cost, like I've explained, variable cost moves in the same direction with your sales. That means if quantity increases, variable cost increase, and if quantity falls, variable cost falls. So if you look at this equation 4, equation 4 is actually a straight line equation that captures the relationship between total cost, fixed cost, and what? And total variable cost. Now, this total cost is A is the intercept. This A is the intercept. What do we mean by the intercept? This A indicates that even when you are not producing one single quantity of output, your total cost will be equal to your fixed cost. But your variable cost, which is the unit variable cost, will now change as your Q, which is the quantity, changes. Okay? So, having established this relationship, if you look at equation 2, equation 4, and you substitute it in equation 1, okay, then you substitute equation 2 and 4 in equation 1, what you now have is equation 5, which is the net profit before tax is now equals to what? The price times the quantity minus A plus Q plus BQ. Now, if you look at equation 2, is telling us that our sales, that's revenue, is equal to P times Q. And then equation 4 is telling us that our total cost is equal to A plus what? BX. So if you substitute this in your equation 1, it will now give you. This is how to build a model. This is how to develop what? A model. Okay. Now, if you look at, there are other key factors you have to put in, because we talked about sales, we talked about revenue, and then for you to arrive at net profit, that is profit after tax, you must have to factor in tax, and that is this component here now. The tax element is what we have as NP is equals to BQ minus A plus B. The A plus BQ is what is your what? Is your variable cost. And then 1 minus K is what? Your tax rate. K is the tax rate. Okay. So I think that's just what I wanted to show you in this slide. Okay. Okay, having talked about this model development, I briefly talked about. I just needed to show you those equations so that you understand how those equations come about when you are reading it on your own. Then we've also talked about data collection. Okay, so now from this model you have developed now. Okay. Any question? Do you have any question? Because I see it's like some people are. Okay, Louis is asking me for, okay, I talked about interval scale, I talked about nominal scale, I talked about ordinal scale, and I talked about ratio scale. Okay, but it's okay. Johnson is saying that another class is coming up by 10. Okay, no problem. I think we're almost done. Okay, any question? Any questions what we discussed so far?
Yeah, Doctor, good evening, sir.
Thank you, my brother.
I would like to throw more light on the intercept. I didn't quite get the relationship, how the intercept came about, where you have total cost equals A. The A is the intercept plus the BQ. So I would like to kindly throw more light on that question. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Why the x-axis will now be your what? Your quantity. Your x-axis is your quantity. Now, if your quantity is at 0, the curve of fixed cost will not start from 0. It will start from a point above 0. And that point above 0 is what we call the intercept. That is A. If you have seen a straight line equation, let me see if I can just share a slide I prepared for something else here to depict. What this simply tells you is What this simply tells you is that when your Q is equals to 0, when your Q, that means when your quantity demanded is equals to 0, then your total cost.
You are now unmuted. You are now muted.
Hello? Yes, it's working.
Look, I can still hear you, but your screen is off.
Okay, this network is can you see the screen now, right? Okay. Now, what we have here now is what total cost and what quantity. Now, what we're saying is variable cost. Let's use this equation now. Y is equals to B0. This B0, let's say that this B0 is equals to what? Is equals to A. And B1 is equals to B. Now, what we're saying is this blue line is your variable costs. Okay.
You are now unmuted.
But this point where
you're in a class, you will be working with the network. I hope you are hearing me now. Last week, we had an introductory lecture on fundamentals of banking and finance. I told you how we're going to do it. We're not going to go very deep. Just speak on the fundamentals. Then we are done. We define finance. We looked at the relationship between finance and other functional areas of it. We looked at the approaches to the study of finance. We moved a little bit further to look at the importance of finance in the financials in the business world. Then we also looked at some types of businesses and their fund sources. We're going to do a little bit more on that today so as to make a lot of things clearer. We have many types of businesses in Nigeria, and each business form has to do with sourcing finance for its activities. We dealt with the one-man business, which we call the sole proprietorship or sole trader. We saw is a type of business that is owned and operated by one man. It's owned and operated by one man, and that does not mean that the trader has no workers. We have workers, yes. There's a very simple business form that starts and ends with the owner. So the business is the same as the owner. And in terms of formation.
Now, having done that, the next thing is now interpreting the results. That is after you have collected your data and feeded it into the model, analyzed it. The next thing is now to interpret the model. This point of data collection, this point of data collection in some material, you will see them call it analysis. Okay, you see them call it analysis. That is after developing your model, then they will have it data collection and the analysis. Okay, so now, but here what we call it here is just what data collection. Okay, so now after that, you now have to interpret. What does it mean? If you look at your notes now, you will see that you use that model to generate what will be the net profit. So what does it mean? Now, I also talked about sensitivity analysis. We have used this model. This model, we can also try to conduct a sensitivity analysis. What happens to the net profit you quoted if tax rate changes? What happens if price per unit changes? What happens if quantity changes? What happens if our variable cost changes? You understand? So all this is the things that have to come into play. Now, interpretation of the result is how does this result, how does it apply to solving that problem that we have specified in the beginning? Okay, you have to interpret it in a way. Now, the same way, there will be a feedback effect. By the time you are analyzing the results, and you see that the result of your analysis, okay, that is at the point of analyzing the results. You see that the findings that you are coming up with is not an optimal result that you are getting. You are not getting an optimal result. Remember, I told you that in this model, in this quantitative techniques, we have what we call quantitative technique system, which comprises of the input, the quantitative techniques, and then the information output. The same way for those of you who were with us in operations management, we talked about production system. There is always a control. So you have put in a raw data, you have transformed it, and there is a kind of information, a target information you are expecting to get. You have to put a control to ensure that the information that is coming out from the quantitative analysis process is in line with the desired information or is free from any error, so that when you rely on it to make decision, it will be a decision that is based on optimal information. Okay, so now, but for this our material, there were the feedback effect was not included to an extent, but the feedback effect okay. But I think it was included before, but it was included after drawing a conclusion. Then you can now go back to the model again and define it. If you look at the chart, you can now, review the process. Okay. So I think with that, the next thing on this thing is what? Implementation. Having done everything, the next thing is to implement what you have. Let's say the information that came out is the desired information. So the next step is to implement. I think we've been able to look at the processes involved or the approaches involved, quantitative techniques, and decision making. Please, on this note, I would like to ask for questions. Because like I said, I don't intend to keep you this thing, because this is a kind of the first time we're having this work. So let me entertain your questions.
Okay, sir. Good evening, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir. So please, there's this exercise under data collection and model validation. Please, on that question, from this equation, you know that the profit times quantity minus this A autonomous, which is the fixed cost. Now,
Yes.
from the question, you say that quantity is equal to 50,000. But when the equation was solved, I don't know how you defeat, because since A is the fixed cost, so how come are we now using quantity as 50,000?
Well, if you look at although this material was developed by a different person, but looking at this, you are talking about the analysis. Now, if you look at the formula is NP is equal, that is the net profit is equals to price times quantity minus A plus BQ into 1 minus 10. Okay. So I think what you should even be asking is the positioning of the point. Because if you look at after that line, the next one is 20 times 20,000.
That's correct.
Okay. I think now I get what you are saying. Look, there is a mix of this 50.
Yeah, is the 50 supposed to be?
So I think there is an error in that particular computation. So in short, there is no A here.
Yes.
Did you observe that? There is no A here. So what it means is that this 50 you are saying is the fixed cost. Okay, this 50 you are saying, okay, I think if you read down, I think I've seen where they talk about that 50 you are saying there is the fixed cost. They now talked about, okay, for the instance, if the firm knows that when it produces and markets 20,000 units at the rate of 20, Okay, are you seeing where they brought the 20,000 from the quantity?
Yes, I think so.
So that's the thing. I think it's just a mix up in this thing. So it's I'm even worried about where they are putting the points. That point supposed to be comma. But you understand the general concept. That's the most important thing.
Okay, sir.
So any other question? Any other question?
Hello, sir. Good evening.
Yeah. Good evening.
Yes, sir. I really don't want us to limit ourselves to the material. You mentioned something on the stochastic data, and I think I'm interested in really at least having a bit understanding of what it is.
Okay. I did not really talk about stochastic data. I talked about stochastic model.
Okay, model. Sorry.
Yes, I talked about stochastic model. And when you talk about stochastic, when we get to regression, in regression analysis, you are going to get a full understanding of that. But like this straight line equation, okay, you have y is equals to a plus bx, okay, but in a stochastic model, a stochastic term will be included in a stochastic model. I don't know if you get what I'm saying. A stochastic term will be included in a stochastic model. In other words, a stochastic model will create room for error correction, or will create room for what? Errors, or error term, as the case may be. And such model is known as what? Stochastic model. While the rest of the other model that was not just like a straight line, this one now we're dealing with now, the current one we're dealing with now is not a stochastic, okay? While when we get to regression, when we now begin to talk about what the regression model with the stochastic term, then that is the concept of what the stochastic model.
All right, sir. Thank you, sir.
Okay. Is there any other question? Okay. I think in the absence of any other question, we'll come to the end of today's class. Except if there is any other question. Okay. So thank you for your time, and I hope we are going to. Dosi, are you asking any question?
No, I wanted to say thank you, sir, for the section.
Okay, you're welcome. Don't worry. When we get to regression model, I will take you deeper on that stochastic term and then the probabilistic and deterministic model. You will have a better understanding. Okay, thank you all, guys. Nice having you. Hope to meet you again.
All right, sir. Thank you, sir.